What is NIL? What will be the impact of NIL? And name, image, and likeness, how will it change college athletics? We're going to break it all down for you here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast. I am Jeremy Warner, Illini Inquirer publisher, and joining us now is our NIL beat writer, Joey Wagner, who's been covering the heck out of this and doing a great job. I hope you've been keeping up with these stories. I know most of you probably hadn't read every one of them, but Joey's been covering the heck out of what this name, image, and likeness is. So Joey, a month of kind of covering all of this as it comes to fruition on Thursday, July 1st. Like, is your head still swimming, or do you feel like you got a good handle on all of this?
Both, right? I mean, I feel like I know as much as I can know right now, but every time, I mean, you see people ask, well, what about this or what about this? And at the open house yesterday with Josh Whitman and Dr. Brian Russell and Grace Dugan and Brad Underwood, the questions came, and I'm like, I didn't think about that. And I think you're going to see that. And Josh kind of said, to paraphrase, I don't remember his exact phrase, he said, we're flying, but we're building the plane at the same time here. I mean, there's going to be stuff that comes up that's what about this or what about that? And in a year, they said, look, we might look back 6 months, a year, 2 years and say, boy, I can't believe we kicked it off and we were doing that. I mean, this isn't some finished product, and there are going to be, every answer is going to be on the table right now. But for the most part, I think I understand the walls of the house. I don't know that I've got every room down completely, but I think I understand a good amount of it.
Yeah, so we're going to try and break down a lot of those questions that people have about this, because it is kind of a complicated topic. But the first big question is, what is name, image, and likeness? And basically, Joey, it's the ability to profit off marketing. It's the ability to profit off the brand that you can build. So a Zion Williamson, who couldn't sell himself to Nike before, or couldn't sell himself to any company, he has the potential now to make millions of dollars off that. Now, he is the top 1 percentile of college athletes, but if it's a golfer at Illinois, they can all of a sudden lend their name, image, and likeness or work for a profit from some business. I mean, that an entity is what it is, or they can give a golf lesson and make money off it and still keep their eligibility. Is that the simplistic way of saying it, Joey?
Yeah, I think so. Look, and we'll use, this starts on July 1st, so I don't think this is breaking news. We'll use Trent Frazier, for example. He was there yesterday at the signing. People in Champaign know Trent because they've watched him. Now, people know him obviously as he's been around town for 4 years, but a lot of people know Trent for 4 years. He's played on the Illinois basketball team. There is a market to have him be able to use. He's not getting paid for playing basketball in this instance, but he's getting paid because he plays basketball and because that's how people know him. So yes, if a pizzeria, if a business, if a social media, they want to say, hey, we would like you to endorse what we've got here, and we'll give you X amount of dollars. Now, Trent Frazier cannot say, I'm Trent Frazier fighting a Illini basketball player. That's not going to work. But what he can say is, I'm Trent Frazier, Division I basketball player. And frankly, if you're in Champaign, Urbana, or the state of Illinois, that's probably still more information than you possibly need. But it goes along those lines. Yes, the camps, autograph signings. A thing yesterday that was talked about that I hadn't learned about a lot about is these gift in kinds. Hey, thanks for coming to our restaurant. If you could tweet a picture that you're here, we'll give you a free burger and fries. Before that, the NCAA would have come in like stormtroopers to stop that, even though it's a $20 meal. That was not something that was going to fly before. But now that's something that could be open. How much will that happen? How much, is that kind of like, do I really want to do this for $15? Because they still got to disclose it. It's not like they can just get it and move it along here. So there's all sorts of those things. But in essence, these brands that they've built as athletes, they're now able to finally cash in on, just in the way that we see, Giannis in the Hulu Plus commercials or whatever it is. The Hulu has live sports. They're not saying I'm so-and-so with the Milwaukee Bucks or I'm Joel Embiid with the 76ers. They're just saying, this is who I am. And if you're a fan of sports, that's who they are. And now college athletes are being able to cash in on that.
I think the other big question is the timing of this, Joey. And the reason this is all coming to a head is this has been a long talked about discussion, right? I mean, this is decades upon decades of why aren't student athletes able to monetize more so than just the full scholarships? Because for most student athletes, I mean, they could go overseas and go pro if they wanted to, but here in this country, based on, all these other, especially basketball, football, if you don't play college athletics, it's been very difficult to get to the pros. But now you're starting to see some of these leagues pop up, some kids going G League, some kids going with this overtime. So you're starting to see more kids choose a different route and kind of go more to the free market. But it's kind of always been the NCAA is not a very free market economy. And now you're getting more of the free market in. But it was basically one state challenged the NCAA. California in 2019 passed a law called the Fair Pay to Play Act, which is basically a name, image, and likeness that's going to begin January 1st, 2023. And they basically put the NCAA on the clock to start these things. And then other states pushed up that timeline. So it's been interesting. It took state legislatures kind of to pressure the NCAA to finally kind of getting to where I think most of the country, and I think an overwhelming majority of the country, sees it as fair that student athletes should be able to monetize off their name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, and the NCAA, this is Wednesday, we're recording this. The NCAA is going to vote and basically say, hey, have at it, but we've got no rules for you, but knock yourselves out, follow your state rules if if you've got them, or, university can have rules, but go for it and good luck. It is essentially what they're saying here. And so it's going to be
the NCAA is basically waiting for a federal government bailout, and they have dragged their feet on this conversation. That's why these states finally put pressure, because their constituents supported this. Obviously, their athletic directors had to support this at some point, and all the Illinois athletic directors certainly have done that. So it's amazing. The NCAA, the NCAA, we got to remember, is Illinois. It is Illinois State, Northern Illinois. These are the members of the institution that employ all the people at the NCAA. They have dragged their feet on this to the point when all of this goes into effect, it's like almost the Wild West of being like, okay, yeah, sure, go for it, but we aren't governing it really. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and by the way, they decided that one day, or what will essentially be like 12 hours before this thing starts to go state to state. So, and essentially it's what Josh Whitman said at the roundtables, what Cam Buckner said, who co-sponsored the bill in the House. It's, you guys have had your chance to make this thing work, and you've not. So we're just going to push ahead here. I mean, we've given you so much time. I don't know how much more time we're willing to kind of sit and let pass here. So the timing is interesting. There's going to be so many ramifications and so many different questions, and is that, and fair market value is going to be something we hear so much down the road. What is fair market value for some of these? What's a fair market value for a student athlete to go to a birthday party and make an appearance at a 6-year-old's birthday party? Well, it's really whatever the host of the birthday party wants to set the fair market value at, right? I mean, you can look and say, boy, I would have never paid that, but somebody did, and there was a market for it. So that's, I know there are some people who say, well, who have objections to this, and I just don't know, Jeremy, you're smarter than I am. I don't know if there's a market where it's just actively suppressed. I mean, this isn't where people are dragging businesses to the table and say, and pay these kids for endorsements. So they want to be a part of this. So there's a market out there for that. It's just before tomorrow, really, that's just not been able to be capitalized on. So we'll see. And look, some players are going to come out, and you're going to see them everywhere, right? We've seen Trent Frazier saying, hello, I am available for you. Cameo, he sounds like Twitch streaming is going to be something for him. We'll probably see him here, there, or wherever. And some players are going to take a little time to see what this landscape looks like, what their best available option is. Is it to open the DMs and say, come find me? I don't know. Is it to, just wait for people to find them on OpenDoors? I don't know. OpenDoors is what Illinois is using to really.
Yeah. Can you explain OpenDoors for people? I think that's a company a lot of people have heard of by this point, but what do they actually do in this process?
So a student athlete can go on there and say, I'm interested in, I can do a TikTok post for you. I can do an Instagram, Twitter, whatever social media post you want. They can find, or these are my interests. I'm interested in X, Y, or Z, and companies can go in and they can find them and say, okay, we are interested in partnering with you. Obviously, if you have a larger social media following, you are more appealing in that realm, right? Nobody wants to pay somebody, who has 300 Twitter followers or Instagram followers. That's just not moving the needle for them. That's not financially something that's really going to benefit them. But here's the thing: a lot of student athletes have a substantially larger social media following than that. And it's my understanding, so OpenDoors will kind of roughly tell you about what your market could be to help you set that baseline. You have so many followers, a post could be worth this much money or that much money. So OpenDoors is really the way for companies to go in and meet these athletes, right? To find out, what they're interested in and how they can get it going. Now, here's the kicker. Here's what I learned last night. To build a contract through OpenDoors, the companies seeking an athlete have to pay a 30% fee. So if you want to pay an athlete $100, well, it's costing you $130. But if you're a local business or wherever and you draw up a contract sitting around a table, you guys approve of it, everything has to be uploaded into OpenDoors. The state of Illinois requires disclosure on this. Now, Illinois cannot say good deal, bad deal. They can say this doesn't fall into the morality clauses as laid out by the state legislation, but they can't say, hey, I think you could probably get a little more than what you're getting. That's not something that they're able to do.
Right. So I feel like we need to take a step back here for a second, Joey, just because there is so much to explain here. And OpenDoors is basically a third-party company, right? That makes these connections between the athlete and between businesses, because Illinois can't do that. The University of Illinois and their athletic department can't do that. They can advise, they can do all these things, but they can't say like, hey, you should take this and not take this. But what is in that NIL bill in Illinois? Like what is the things Illinois student athletes can do and can't do based on that bill? Like, what are the parameters of SB 2338?
Alcohol, tobacco, drugs, that's not going to fly. Let me pull up the story here just to make sure I've got it all. Adult entertainment, you're not going to see college athletes being a part of that. Oh, boy.
And they also have to report. Right. They have to report.
They have to report it. And that's what OpenDoors really, outside of finding the athletes, this is where they disclose it. And someone will go through and look at all the disclosures and see if it falls into all the right clauses. But this is really the hub. So even if someone were to draw up a company at a table at a restaurant, they've got to upload that contract into OpenDoors to say, hey, this is what we've done. This is, how it handled. Now, there won't be the fee or whatever, but it's got to go in there. Even a free meal at a restaurant, you've got to take a picture and put it in OpenDoors. Everything flows through those doors there. So that's really the key here. You're not going to see, I think there was some confusion about that, for me, at least a couple of weeks ago, where you could look up and see a student athlete, in a commercial. Everything flows through that. Everything that you accept has got to be disclosed. And again, no sports betting, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, vaping products, adult entertainment, or any other product, quote, considered to be inconsistent with the values of a post-secondary institution or which would bring embarrassment, scandal, or ridicule to a college university. Okay, so
any risque products, right?
You're not going to see.
It's got to be PG-13, basically.
Right. You're not going to see a student athlete at a local bar, I guess, but it's a gray area, because if it's a restaurant, I don't know, right? I just don't know. So there are rules in place, and that's something that Josh Whitman, that Governor Pritzker, that Cam Buckner, they said, look, we've done this to a sense that it's very, detailed, that we feel like we've got the safety parameters in place to help guide them through this. So we'll see, right? I mean, we'll see how fast and furious, but OpenDoors is the hub, and that's what people have to understand. Illinois calls it the Influence Program. I think DePaul called it Legacy. It's all different words for what really comes down to. OpenDoors is built within this program we have within our athletic department.
So 20 states have passed NIL laws, specific laws. 11 of them take effect this year. I believe almost all of them on July 1st, so on Thursday. Then there are 12 more states that go into effect in the next couple of years. And I imagine you're seeing, executive orders. Ohio was one of those. Kentucky was one of those. Like, they're just like, hey, we can't be at a disadvantage to some of our competitors here. And I'm sure there's an intense lobby from the athletic directors and coaches in those states to make sure they're not left behind. And Illinois certainly has been part of this first wave. But we mentioned it, Joey, the NCAA is kind of taking a back seat here. So is this on Illinois to enforce, or the NCAA? Like, how will this all be monitored and enforced?
So they hired a guy, Cam Cox, who's heading up the influence program. He started literally last week. He's a lawyer from New York City. Sports is his, not from New York City. He has been practicing, I should say, in New York before he took this job. So he is the one who's going to be watching these disclosures come through here. And that comes, I think, as he described it, comes through OpenDoors after it's already been, the contract has been completed. So that's, I think, but that, to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if there's a morality thing, you're going to want to stop that in its tracks before it gets going. So this is on Illinois to enforce it. Again, not direct them where to go, not tell them they could get more money here or there, but just to make sure it falls within the legal work of the state. The NCAA is saying, good news for you. It seems like you guys got a grip on this. See you at March Madness.
All right, Joey. So when we come back, let's take a quick break. This is obviously a very exciting time, especially if you're a student athlete, but it's also a very, I think, nerve-wracking time, maybe for some student athletes who want to make sure they do this right. Certainly for the NCAA, certainly for these Division I programs, also a lot of opportunity here. Let's talk about those dynamics of what this means for players, how much they can benefit from this, and the potential pitfalls. We'll talk about that coming up next on the Illini Inquirer Podcast. All right, Joey. So Trent Frazier is open for business. You talked with him yesterday. Darian Lowe, an offensive lineman at Illinois, you talked to him yesterday. What do you think? What are you hearing about how much these players can benefit? How much could a Trent Frazier earn? I mean, I think we know somebody like a Zion Williamson or, a Joe Burrow could have made probably millions. But for somebody like Trent Frazier, Darian Lowe, what is the opportunity? Or an Andre Curbelo, or somebody like a Kofi Coburn, if he were to come back? Not that seems very likely.
Yeah, not to get out of a figure, but that is the quietest thing I can find right now. No one seems to have, at least seems to be willing to share that figure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Andre Curbelo, for instance, he's got this vibrant personality. He's flashy. He's also bilingual, right? And he is well known in Puerto Rico. You would figure to think that could help him. He could do well with this. Iota Sumu, Trent Frazier. I don't know the figure, and I don't know that. I'm sure people do know it, and I'm sure they're touting that figure in meetings that we are not privy to. But I don't know. Could six figures be a possibility? Sure, it could, right? I mean, I think that's reasonable for some of the top line faces of college athletics, that six figures is reasonable. And I'm sure when this all comes out, I'll look at that and say, boy, I was probably low on some of these faces of college athletics, but I don't know. And it's going to be so different. The men's gymnast, Dylan Holek, I believe is his last name. He's got 500,000 followers on TikTok. I don't know that anybody would have walked into this and thought, hey, this guy is going to be one of the top earners. But he will, because he's got this social media. So it varies. And what is that number? I don't know. Greater than zero. Not to be a jerk about it. I just, it's more than what they were making. But how much is that? I don't know. How much could it change? I don't know. I think maybe we'll start seeing some of these. I don't know that we'll ever see the figures, but I think the word will start to get out, I would think, in the course of the next probably even 2 weeks. Like, hey, this is going really well for so-and-so. And what is really well, I don't know.
I think that's one of the big questions is we don't know. And it's a brand new territory that we're going to find this out as it goes along. I think the top stars in college athletics, I mean, we always talk about men's basketball and football, obviously. And I think a lot of those obviously have a huge following, but some of the biggest earners can be women's basketball players, like Sabrina Ionescu when she was here, Caitlin Clark, who's over in Iowa. I mean, these are some of the most popular athletes in the country. Women's gymnasts, there's a lot of, and men's gymnasts as well, but they can make certainly a lot of money off this as well. So Illinois and the athletic department have been pretty progressive with this, Joey. They have embraced it. I think Brett Bielema obviously hired someone, Patrick Pearson, as you said, to kind of handle this and to build up brand and image. And he accepted this and kind of embraced it because he knows it's going to be a part of college football and you got to be at the forefront of it. Josh Whitman certainly has done that. Brad Underwood spoke yesterday, and I think he knows the power of Illinois' fan base, of the Illinois basketball interest. And he certainly could sell that to somebody like Dawson Garcia, the Marquette transfer who is visiting Illinois this week. So what do you make of the mood inside that Illinois office? I know some of them are a little nervous about what this will look like and the fact that it could be kind of the wild, wild west here early on. But what do you think Illinois sees NIL as for their school?
Recruiting tip, man. This recruiting tool, Brad Underwood made no secrets about that. Now, that doesn't mean they're saying, come here and we will drive you to X, Y, and Z establishment, or we will give you numbers for X, Y, and Z person you could work with. That's just not going to work. And that's going to end the party before it starts. But they can say, over the last X number of months, our student athletes have had this kind of impressions on social media, and they've built their brand up this way. They can say I believe they can say they've made this much money on average on NIL. I think that falls within the rules. That is a recruiting tip, right? That helps you to have all that information available to say to a recruit, come here, and as soon as you're enrolled, you're going to have these opportunities to make some money here. Now, what we'll see. I mean, I know a lot of people immediately hear stuff like that and think, this is going to be a total mess around the country, because not everyone is going to, the people are going to toe the line. Let's just be honest with this. In college athletics, coast to coast, people are going to toe the line. We'll see, right? I mean, I think having these numbers and figures available, and Brad touted out when Io announced he returned last year, that video had 2 times the impressions of the NBA finals. So they can say, hey, there are people in the state, people in this community are crazy about this on social media. They love it. They can't get enough. And as we talked about, the more followers you have, the more appealing you are to companies. So it's a recruiting tool.
Yeah. And I know there's like these traditional ways of marketing, right? Autograph sales, like you said, merchandise, t-shirts, I would assume it was a lottery deal, things like that. We think of that stuff, but talking to people inside that athletic department, the number one thing is going to be social media. One, because it's easy. They don't have to go anywhere. They can do it from their phones. But with all the followers they have, it's immediate reach. It's immediate impressions, as you're talking about, rather than some random commercial on local TV that might get 5,000 people watching or something like that. Or, one autograph, session in Muhammad or something like that, where you're going to get probably a couple hundred people and, get some good money doing that. But the social media aspect of it is so easy. Videos on YouTube, whatever it is, it's going to be very interesting to see how players kind of accept these brands. But this is going to be like, how quickly do you think these athletes embrace this, Joe? I mean, is it July 1st, Thursday, Friday, we're going to see Trent Frazier out there?
Yes. I mean, Trent said, look, this is my last year here. I've got a window to capitalize. I have every intent to capitalize on this. Some athletes won't, right? Some athletes are going to want to watch the lay of the land and see what it looks like. This just broke here. The Omaha World News in Nebraska broke that all collegiate student athletes in Nebraska will officially have at least one business offer when they can begin profiting off their name, image, and likeness. And it is coming from a restaurant.
Runza. It's basically a gas station restaurant, like Casey's General Store.
Oh.
So I don't know if that's like they get free food or something.
Don't get me off track when talking about Casey's here. But now, will every athlete in Nebraska run to that and do that? I don't, maybe it's just not for some athletes if they decide what they want their brand to be. I thought Eva Rubin, the women's basketball player yesterday, was so thorough and thought out in this, and she's a type 1 diabetic. I think we could see her working with insulin pump companies or whatever it takes to let her play basketball. And that is a brand that I think she would be very interested in being a
Yeah.
part of. Now, not everyone is going to want to jump on every single brand out there, and it's just how they want to market. And that's a little bit what Brian Russell talked about. Is his concern is we want to see, what athletes, he wants to know that athletes are thinking this all the way through, right? What is going to have the longest term impact of building who they are rather than getting a free meal. And well, some athletes, and so this is interesting, we talked about the deal in kind where you take a picture, but if an apartment company wants to have you sign autographs 3 times a month, and in return you get half off of your rent for that month, that's another thing. That's, again, it's got to be disclosed, but it's not a local commercial. And frankly, we probably wouldn't know about it unless we heard about the autograph signing, right? And it's one of those things where you don't see, so-and-so on radio or television or on social media promoting this, but they're still benefiting just kind of outside of most of the public eye. Obviously, people are going to want to get their autograph signed. They're going to push that all the way to the moon to get people there.
Yep.
But there's so many different layers and elements to this.
So Joey, with every well-intentioned new thing that comes along or new policy, there are unintended consequences that could have negative effects. And we think of the first one as new policy, new rule, in a competitive marketplace like college athletics. Someone is going to try, as you said, and step into that gray area, which is very big gray area, it seems like right now in college athletics, and take advantage of this. So it just feels like early on here, what are the boundaries set in place to keep a school from kind of acting like a pay to play? Like you said, a big time donor, they bring in a big time basketball player for a birthday party for $200,000. Like how is that kind of kept in place when obviously that is not fair market? But if it's the free market, but also it feels like the NCAA, that's where they would come in, or the federal would come in and say, you can only make this much and put a cap on it. But it seems like those things aren't fully in place yet.
Yeah, and I don't know that a cap would go over very well, right? And I think, again, with the Supreme Court ruling in the Alston case, I think the NCAA is going to approach a lot of things very gingerly, because it feels, Jeremy, we talked about this when the case went, it feels like this is kind of walking on eggshells if you're the NCAA, because the Supreme Court has kind of laid out like, hey, I don't really think what you guys are doing is all that right in the marketplace. But it kind of stopped there for at least now. So a cap to me is just not the answer. And I asked specifically about that, where I said, what would it raise a red flag in OpenDoors or wherever this has got to be disclosed if so-and-so went to a birthday party and they recorded that they made $200,000 for coming in and singing a happy birthday for 15 minutes and walking out of there? And here's effectively what I was told is, okay, yeah, we understand where that could be, could raise some flags, but the fair market value is what whoever sets the market is what the market is. If someone's willing to do that, not everyone's going to be willing to do that, but you can't come in, or I think it might be challenging to come in and say, no, so
Right. It's basically the bag, as people talk about it, is just out there in the open. It's just out there in the open in turn for one service. But if you're at a birthday party for an hour, if you got paid that much, I guess.
Hey, good work if you can find it, man.
Yeah, I guess it can't be attached to attending that university, but I mean, come on, how do you monitor that? How do you keep that? So yeah, that is a concern of certain schools getting advantages or certain schools just, taking advantage of these rules, which I expect to happen. And there also just seems to be a traditionalist argument here, Joey, and I think it's a minority of people, but this is amateur athletics. This is what the NCAA has held on for so long. But that seems to be the losing side of the argument at this point, that, this is quasi professional athletics. And I think now the reality is, yep, we know we are. So we're accepting that we are now quasi professional, quasi amateur. Like we're somewhere in between now.
Right. I don't think how people view college athletics should change on July 1st, right? I mean, this is just kind of the rules around it are changing, but what this quasi-professional, this is what it has been. That's why we're at this point right now, is because people said, hey, what we do on a field, on a court, on a track, in a gym, we're kind of pumping in money to this place here. And
Kind of,
we're
kind
not
of.
really, yeah, like we're not really seeing much of that. And eventually, as you said, it took a state to say, hold up now, this isn't how an open market should work. So none of that's changing. I mean, everything's changing, which is what we've written for a month now, or beyond that. But I don't think what college athletics is changing. I saw people, there's some takes out there, right? I mean, there are some takes that exist on the internet here, and they said,
People
well,
are mad online, Joey. That doesn't
mad
happen.
online. I got a little mad online watching people get mad online yesterday, and they said, well,
That's when you close out, you exit, man. That's
exactly
that's when you
that.
just
And
laugh
I
at it.
turned on some TV and checked out, but they said, well, they're not playing for the love of the game anymore. It's like, well, hold on. You can love the game and also love having $100 in your pocket for doing something. That doesn't change. The reality is a lot of
You and I love our job, and we like getting paid for it. That
yeah,
these are not mutually exclusive.
right. I would not be doing this for free. I enjoy the time that we spend podcasting and writing stories, not games, but money is nice, right? And that doesn't make me like this any less. Frankly, if I wasn't getting paid, I would probably like it less than I was if I was getting paid for doing this. So I just think it's a change, and people look at this like, oh my God, who cares? I mean, this is coming out of the pockets of businesses who are signing up for this voluntarily. This isn't get there now. No, now there are going to be concerns, as we just talked about, things where you look at it and say, that doesn't seem entirely right to me, as I understand how this works. But I just don't. So you see a couple, really the biggest impact for this is going to be your social media feed. If you follow a bunch of athletes, it's probably going to look a little different than what it has before, in terms of, you're going to maybe see some Gatorade, some Powerades, some headphones. You're going to see stuff like that. And you'll see them on TV. You'll see more TV commercials. And God forbid you get to take your kid to get an autograph somewhere. Oh, the horror, right? I mean, oh, gee, can you imagine? So,
Well, and think about that. Like, how many people listening to this podcast right now would pay 10 or $20 to get an autograph from Andre Curbelo? Like, wouldn't that make you feel better that, like, hey, you're supporting this guy that he can send money back to his family? And several of these student athletes don't come from very rich backgrounds. Some do, but either way, why not allow them to profit off that market? Some of you wouldn't want to pay for an autograph. That's fine. But like, there's a market for that. And why shouldn't they be able to capitalize off that? I think this is a very interesting issue, Joey, because as you know, there's not a lot that brings people together in this country, but like, there's labor rights on the left, there's free market on the right. And where do we meet? It's at name, image, and likeness, where you're seeing these bills pass, with 70%, 80% majorities. The Supreme Court is 9-0 on their ruling against the NCAA because of these two issues. It's a different case, but very similar, background. So it's very interesting how, like, the country is kind of, for the most part, coming together. I think that vocal minority against it is a pretty small minority.
And I also just don't know how much research the vocal minority has done into it. I think they see this and say, well, I don't want the university giving athletes money. And well, they're not even close to doing that. Look, Vidarian Lowe was one of the players we talked to yesterday. Jeremy, I remember he was kind of a quiet, his sophomore year. It's like, I would have never pegged him to be speaking at a press conference with the governor. It's this monumental. Anyway.
Well, I think about that image. And for the University of Illinois, I thought that was great PR yesterday to have, no matter what you think of the governor of Illinois, and I know people have very differing opinions of him, you have him sitting in your basketball arena with that background, with Josh Whitman, the state representative, Cam Buckner, is a former Illini who spearheaded this bill along with Napoleon Harris, the Northwestern former football player who's now a state representative. And you have Vidarian Lowe and Ava Rubin and Trent Frazier all standing there with him. I thought that was fantastic imaging for Illinois. And I thought it was really smart of them to kind of have that all together and have these student athletes, as you're talking about, give their stories and why this is something they want. And they're all very different stories.
And look, we wrote a story about Badarian and his, I think his story now is well told. He's got 2 children. He's a guardian for his brother. He's married. And we saw a lot of the feedback was really pulling for this guy, rooting for you, Badarian. I hope you have a good season. Okay, that's great. But now if he does an autograph signing, you can really, really root for him, right? And the NCAA is not going to tell him he can't play in the next 2 games. And so that's the way that I think people don't, I mean, I'm not, if you don't want to go get an autograph, don't go get an autograph. But if there's a way that you feel like that's your outlet to support them, then now you have that outlet. So yes, there are going to be unintended consequences. And yes, you're going to see over the course of the next however long the people are going to say such and such happened, and eyebrows are going to be raised across the country as all of this starts to unfold in real time. But there's a way that these, and I think a lot of people think, could it stop somebody from going pro for a year, right? A lot of, you see, it's a well-told story. Yeah, maybe they're not entirely ready, but, this is the right time for them in their personal life to go pro and start getting a paycheck. You cannot fault them for that. Maybe, and again, we don't know what the money's going to look like, right? I mean, we just don't. But is there a chance that could buy another year in college for your favorite athlete? Sure there is, because the money that they have the potential to make exists now. It might not be enough to hold off that overwhelming desire to start their professional career, but the opportunity is on the table.
I think of somebody like Matt Leinart. Remember when he came back and everybody was shocked? Like, how much money would he have made as a senior at USC, as the Heisman front runner at that point? Now, he didn't win it, and he actually slipped a little bit in the draft, but he would have made a lot of money his senior year if he would have came back. I mean, Andrew Luck, I don't know how interested he would have been in that, but he was also a guy who shocked me. I mean, if you go to another level, like if this were a couple years in and maybe Illinois is still trying to convince him, but Kofi Cockburn, if he had a year of figuring out like how much can I make off this, he seems unlikely to get drafted, and maybe he just wants to go pro and doesn't want to go to school, and he's going to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars next year probably anyway. But could he do that at Illinois? Andre Curbelo, is he a borderline draft pick next year? And if he came back for a third year with a potential Big Ten championship team coming back, what could he make? I agree with you. I think a lot of that is there, that, hey, how much can that change those decisions? And it really could help schools in their pitch of keeping these guys rather than them going off. And to be honest with you, Joey, another part of that, and it could help the NCAA's cause, is they want these guys to graduate, right? Like if there's incentive to stay, they're more likely to graduate, which is great for the NCAA. And more importantly, it's great for those student athletes too.
Right. Yeah. And again, we have no idea, right? We have no idea what financially this is going to look like, or at least I don't. I know people have ideas of it, and not enough that I would probably feel comfortable in sharing exactly something. Because every person you talk to has a different figure, right? So, and not particularly willing to share a lot of those figures. But the fact that the figure has potential to be greater than zero. I think that's how I'm going into this, looking at it, that even if in a calendar year an athlete comes out with $5,000, I don't know, it's just a completely random number. Well, it was $5,000 more than they had at this time last year for posting a tweet, right? I mean, it doesn't. So yes, to the greater point, that could absolutely play into it, and especially as you start to get more of data, as you collect data that our athletes have made this, and this, and we can project you to make this if you were to come back for another year. That data right now just can't really exist, at least in the realm to share it from them.
So I'm trying to think of a way to sum up this, Joey. It's that the college athletics world has changed. Most people believe it is fair for the players to be doing this, that most universities, most athletic departments, most states now are embracing this. Student athletes are ridiculously excited about these opportunities. And I'm sure there's a lot of former student athletes who are very jealous of that right now. But their fight, whether it started with Ed O'Bannon versus the NCAA, I think, fans, this will allow them more opportunities to interact or to help out the student athletes that they root for, but that the NCAA is kind of being dragged along with this right now, and that there could be downsides of this. And we still don't know exactly how much student athletes will benefit. And we also don't know how many problems this will cause. Like it feels like we need to convene back in a year to discuss exactly what this looks like and how it has changed college athletics.
And maybe in a year, the NCAA will have given any bit of guidance ever at any point to help this out. Look, here's, as we get closer to this thing in 12 hours now, when Josh Whitman made a good point about this, as we talk about the NCAA, they now know the rules they have to play by, right? They have known those rules for about a month, roughly a month, when this bill in the state was passed in the House and in the Senate. So they've been able to prepare along those lines. And I remember Josh had told us at the roundtable is, we're prepared to pivot if there's a national. And I think the overwhelming preference is just, let's make this a national thing. I mean, that doesn't seem to be a secret from people that you hear from who are on the record and saying things. But to be able to know what the rules are and the parameters are, that has helped them. And I will say, Illinois has been very aggressive in pushing this out. I mean, Brian Russell told me, quote, "open for business." We use that in the headline. That was literally on the wall in the Smith Center yesterday when they opened. They had an open house for businesses to come in. I thought that was a smart move. I mean,
they were literally open for business.
They literally, and they want these businesses to partner with their student athletes. Now they can't, again, I feel like you got to say this every time, they cannot be the matchmaker in this experience here, but they can provide the student athletes with the information they need and the businesses. And I thought that was a really smart thing last night, to have businesses who could potentially be interested in creating a partnership with these student athletes and explain to them, step by step how this would work. And credit to Josh and Illinois for kind of getting out there and saying, hey, July 1st, man, we don't want our kids to wait if they don't want to wait. If they want to be a part of this, we want to arm everybody with the information to have this. And again, we'll see what happens in a year. What does this, not what happens, I think we know what's going to happen, is this is going to continue on, but what this looks like, what is the landscape in a year? What is the actual value? Because that's what everybody wants to know, everybody's finances. That's just how we all exist here. It's why everybody fights over seeing a contract or whatever. They want to know what these kids can make, and for what reason, I couldn't begin to tell you, but they want to know, and that's fine. So maybe we'll have more of an understanding of that 6 months in a year. I don't know.
It's amazing how much college athletics is changing this year. It is amazing how much it is. It's been a long fight for a lot of these different issues that we've been talking about, whether it's a one-time transfer, NIL, all of it. It's all coming to a head right now, and it's a new world for college athletics. And I think it's mostly for the positive, in my opinion. I think it's mostly for the positive of being fair to these student athletes, where this has been, as Brett Kavanaugh said, this has been a monopoly, and now student athletes, after all this fighting, and we've had so many debates about this over the last decade, that it's starting to become more fair within this NCAA model, and we'll see how it goes moving forward. But Joey, I think we covered it all, and I think you've been covering the heck out of this during Name, Image, and Likeness, and we'll continue to learn more.
Yeah, man, it's been eye-opening. It's been fun. Yesterday was a long day, I think, for both of us, but it's been fun to kind of learn some of the ins and outs of this.
Thank you, Joey.
Thank you.